When we talk about poor people or poverty, we only tend to think of beggars on the road. However, all people who are poor are not beggars. Poor people could be laborers, landless farm workers, daily wage earners, and children working at roadside food joints and tea stalls. Before we proceed, let us look at a definition of poverty. Poverty can be defined as the lack of common things like food, clothing, shelter, safe drinking water, medical care, and education, which determine the quality of life. Poverty is a worldwide challenge. However, the problem is more severe in India. Nearly 25% of our entire population lives in poverty. This means India has around 26 crore poor people, which is the largest for any country in the world. Not all people living in cities are rich, and not all people living in villages are poor. Poverty exists in both urban and rural India. There are certain things that are common in the life of poor people in urban and rural India. These include hunger and malnutrition, lack of proper housing and shelter, they cannot get health care in case of illness, and have no regular job and income. There is also lack of sanitation and safe drinking water. There is no education for children who often work as child laborers. There is hopelessness about life and ill treatment from others who are better off. Mahatma Gandhi devoted his life to India's poor. He said poverty is the worst form of violence. He insisted that true independence for India will come only when its poorest people become free of suffering. Social scientists use different types of indicators to understand poverty. The most commonly used indicators relate to the levels of income of people and their consumption of goods. Now, poverty is also observed using other social indicators like lack of education, health care, sanitation, and safe drinking water. Social scientists these days are concerned about the concepts of social exclusion and vulnerability associated with poverty. Let us study these concepts in detail. The concept of social exclusion states that poor people have to live in poor surroundings, excluded from neighborhoods of people who are better off. Social exclusion can be both an effect and a cause of poverty. A person may be forced to live in poor surroundings because he or she is poor. Also, a person may be poor because he stays in poor surroundings where he has no means to improve his income and situation. People living in slums are excluded from facilities and benefits like clean surroundings, good roads, and clean water supply that people who are better off enjoy. Social exclusion excludes people from equal opportunities of education, health care, employment, and general quality of life. Vulnerability is the measure of the probability of certain groups of people becoming poor or remaining poor in future. Vulnerability is determined by the availability of options for employment, education, and health care etc. For example, landless farm laborers with limited options for education, healthcare, and employment are more vulnerable to remaining poor in the years to come in comparison with farmers who own land. Vulnerability is also determined by the ability of people to handle bad times and natural disasters like earthquakes, floods, and tsunamis. People who are already poor or do not have the means to cope with such hard times are more vulnerable to poverty in the times to come.